Well, hello and welcome to Outdoor Oklahoma. I'm Todd Craighead. We're here at the Autry Technology Center in Enid today, where some of our local wardens are the center of attention during a very special event open to the public. Local hunters have been invited to bring their deer in to have their racks officially scored. Now, the process is extremely detailed and sometimes pretty complicated. Now, depending on the rack, there can literally be dozens of length and circumference measurements that are taken down to the 1/8 of an inch. Then all the measurements are added up for a cumulative score. If the score is at least 135 inches, the hunter has the privilege of having his or her buck recognized in our record book, named after the former wildlife biologist largely credited with the restoration of deer in Oklahoma, Mr. Cy Curtis. A wildlife department helping hunters celebrate our state's incredible big game hunting opportunities. Just another reason to love Oklahoma and the adventures that await you.
We're out here at the northwest Oklahoma at the Cooper Wildlife Management area and along the Beaver River where we've been investigating how man has adapted to changing conditions. And out here in northwest Oklahoma, we know over just the last couple of years that we can go from very wet, rainy years to extreme droughts. This pattern repeats itself over and over and over again and has, since about the last ice age, the last 20,000 years. And so we've always been interested in trying to see how prehistoric peoples utilized Oklahoma, particularly this region, and how their adaptations changed through time. Some of our earlier investigations along the river and its area has turned up some bison kill sites that date to between 10,000 and 11,000 years ago. These are some of the first inhabitants of Oklahoma. They include members of the Clovis culture between about 10,800 and 11,500 years ago, and then the subsequent culture of the Folsom people between that 10,800 up to about 10,200 years ago. These people were hunting large bison, animals that were about 20% larger than our modern animals, and using nothing more than a spear to kill them. And they did this all on foot. They didn't have horses. All of these kill events were done on foot. They discovered back during Clovis times that you could take a herd of animals and run them into a gully that came into the Beaver River channel and kill these animals while they were contained in these dead-end gullies. The area out here is one of the prime areas that we've been looking at to understand not only how the kills took place, but a context or scenario of what the rest of the region looked like. And so we're not just looking at buffalo kill sites, but we also want to know how the environment changed. And for this, we have to look at clues in other areas. So right now, part of our research is looking for places on the landscape that we can get information about the past. And in looking up and down the Beaver River over the last couple of years, we've identified several spots that we want to do more in-depth research. And one of them is right here that we are at today. What drew our attention to this place was a couple of things. One is a very high bank behind me that contains various layers of soils. And it is within these soils that we will get the information that we seek. We will find out about whatever bones from animals that are in there and identify those. We'll also find out about what plants were growing on the surface when each one of those soils formed by looking at the pollen that's contained in the soil. So all of this information we'll put together and try to recreate the environment and how it changed. This particular site has these different layers that date from over 14,000 years ago all the way up to historic times, including right at the very surface here is where the old military trail that connected Fort Dodge to Fort Supply came across this area, with Fort Supply just being a little bit back behind us. Now, looking at this high bank was only part of what drew our attention. Other things included some bones that were eroding out, and these bones included some of these large bison. Here we have 2 ankle bones from the bison. These particular bones came from a layer that dated to somewhere around 12,000 years ago. And so this is before the extinction event. So these guys would have been ones that would have still been around when mammoths and horse and camel were living out here. Below this, in a level that dated over 14,000 years ago, we have the teeth of a baby mammoth. This is one of the teeth from this very young baby mammoth. It's just an isolated tooth. We don't have the rest of the mammoth. It's just been washed in to this bank at around 14,000 years ago. To give you a perspective, a mammoth is the size of an African elephant. And we have people in Oklahoma 11,000 years ago that were hunting these very, very large critters. We hope to figure out how that environment was changing during the time period of when we had the mammoth to when we had this ancient bison still on the landscape. And then we will compare that to the environment that we've learned about in the past from sites also along the Beaver River that included the bison kill sites that are between 10,000 and 11,000 years ago. The importance of this time period is that it's at the end of what's known as the Pleistocene, which is the last ice age. And right after we had glaciers up in Wisconsin and Canada, this is when we think some of the earliest cultures, earliest peoples came into the lower parts of North America. So we are very interested in not only when people are arriving, and particularly when they're coming to Oklahoma, but we also want to know what changes and what the environment was like when they got here. One of the first things that we see is they're showing up hunting mammoths, and then the mammoths go extinct. What happened? What caused this to occur, and how did it affect the people?
We are completing a soil and geologic description on a segment of this hill slope. We've started at the top, identified different layers according to their differences in color, particle size, or what we call texture. We're identifying buried landscapes by the dark layers. So the people at the top are describing that in detail. The people on the left of them are also have a segment of information or segment of the profile that's not observed in the main profile, but we want to include in it. And the people at the bottom are trying to find out where we should end our observation. So we have 3 groups working, one on a kind of a side segment, and then one on the main profile above, and then people at the bottom trying to determine how deep
of the soil. So like
okay.
different horizons have different color. We can look into that. And then
Your darkers will indicate topsoil. You have accumulation organics, and if on the high wall you can see there's been it's been stable for a while, so it built up organics, and you can see the darker color. And then it's been buried with the lighter colors like subsoil now.
And part of what we're finding out is during the last ice age, Oklahoma was a grassland. It was a very lush prairie sort of grassland, somewhat similar to the tall grass prairies of eastern Oklahoma. And what would we give to have those sort of grasslands out here today? Well, to have those sort of grasslands, it required a lot more moisture and a lot cooler temperatures. When we look then forward in time to the post-Pleistocene period, when we're getting things warming up to just as hot as it is today, we see that the grasslands are immediately changing, but they're not changing to a very short plains sort of grassland. It stays as a mixed grass, but a lot more dense than what we have today. So even the first initial warm-up time periods of 10 to 11,000 years ago are showing that this area out here was still part of the plains. It was still a grasslands. And this is significant for Oklahoma and for its earliest inhabitants, the Clovis people, because they would have had available any grazing animals that were adapted to grasslands. This included the large mammoth, and it also included these very large bison antiquus.
So this profile is an aggregation of sediments with unique features in the soil profile. A dark layer of stability, meaning that this used to be the land surface with plant roots growing in it, and it darkened this area, and so you might imagine this is a surface that people could have walked on. Here we have another smaller layer, so we have it buried by sediment, another little stability period, and a dry period represented by this light color. And then we have particularly a segment that's red where the stream aggraded or put material above this soil, this buried soil, and you have the sequence at the top, which is another stability period, which is represented by today. So this is an aggregation of stream deposits with two dry periods represented in our past and a period of stability where a rich soil is formed.
And everyone I talk to out there, the ranchers, the farmers, they all want to know about when did junipers come in? When did the cedar come in? Well, based on their pollen, we've had cedars and junipers here as early ago as over 13,000 years before present, and with some of the bigger spikes occurring about every 1,000 years to 2,000 years. And then when we get into the more modern times, we can see there's a large spike approximately 3,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, and then this is the amount of cedar and juniper out on the landscape today. So it's a fairly good sized spike, but it's not the only time we've seen this amount of juniper. The other plants that are represented out here that are key to our understanding of the environment and that ranchers and farmers are interested in is this column here, which represents the grasses. This is what the grassland pollen sample looks like today. This is a short grass prairie, but if you see as you go back in time, back 3,000 years ago, it has 10 times the amount of grasses on the landscape as it does today. But if we move back 10,000 years ago, it even grows more than 20 times the amount of grasses today. So somewhere around 10,500 years ago, this area was a very lush grassland. And this graph is showing us what the carbon in the soil is doing. You hear a lot today about carbon sequestration, and we're going to look at how this works even in the past. If we go back 20,000 years ago to the height of the last ice age, the Wisconsin Ice Age, we can see that there's a very low amount of carbon in the soils, of carbon isotopes in the soil. And this corresponds with the coolness of the last glacial maximum. This upper curve is representing what is happening in the ice sheets in Greenland. The lower one is showing the changes in the carbon out here in northwest Oklahoma. You can see these two graphs have the same high peaks, the same low peaks. They mirror each other even though they're thousands of miles apart in their territory. There's some very key aspects to this, and one is it is very warm. This -16 peak in here represents a hot period. Down here at -22 is a cold period, and today the modern peak would be right in here at about a -17.5. And so it's not quite as warm as it was in the past at about 10,000 years ago and 15,000 years ago, but we are seeing an upswing in heat. And so it's getting hotter and drier. This is what we also then saw with our grasses and our other plants. There are other trends in here that are important to note, and these are the main ones that I'm interested in as an archaeologist working on bison sites. And one of these is right in through here. We start with it cold, and it warms up, and then it drops back down to nearly as cold as it was during the last ice age. This is when the mammoths went extinct, and it's right after this time that the bison that did not go extinct just flourished and their herd sizes increased. And then not only did they increase there, as temperatures warmed up, the grasslands expanded and the bison numbers increased, and people came in and were hunting bison. And this continues all the way through the modern era. As we move back to look at what was going on all the way with our pollen, we remember we had this big spike in grasses at 10,500. This is the exact same time when the bison numbers were exploding. And this is when we have Folsom culture move into Oklahoma, and these folks were doing these large bison kills. And so we see our time of extinction when the mammoths and horse and other large animals went extinct is represented right here. And then as the grasses expanded and the bison numbers expanded, and people came in to hunt these bison. So this is why it's important for us to get an idea of what the past environment has looked like, and then bring in the animals and the people onto this landscape and see how these changes correlate through time. And it provides us a much broader picture and an understanding of the adaptability of people in Oklahoma.
My name's Allen Couch. I'm a game warden in Haskell County. I've been in county here for about 15 years. I worked in the far southeast part of the state for about another 5, so I've been working for a total of almost 20 years now as a game warden. So Haskell County is a really smaller kind of county in the state. I usually describe it as it's small, but it's really diverse. I'd say we have a little bit of everything that the state has to offer, but not necessarily great anything. So we go from the far south end of the county where it's pine forest and pine plantations and kind of mountainous type kind of area to the middle part of the county where a lot of native prairie type kind of valley type kind of areas. You get on the north end and it's a lot of water. So we've got Kerr Lake, the Arkansas River, the Canadian River, Eufaula Lake. In the winter time, I usually, my busiest season is definitely by far waterfowl season, and I'd say 90 to 95% of my non-resident activity is due to waterfowl. Oh, my favorite part of the county is this north end of the county. I like the water, I like the river bottoms. I grew up in the north end of this county. I was born here in Stigler, which is the county seat in Haskell County, and went to high school here, K through 12. If somebody's looking for something new or something cool to see in the county, I'd probably first send them to Sandboys WMA. It's the new WMA on the far south end of the county. A lot of scenic vistas to overlook there, opportunities to hike, waterfowl, a really nice creek to be around down there, offers some really cool opportunities. Yeah, you come across a game warden in the field, no need to be nervous. I run into a lot of people that are just naturally nervous, think that we're there to try to find something wrong. Most of the time, I'd say 99% of my contacts are extremely friendly. Hey, how's it going? Having any luck? Visiting with how they're doing for the day. I had a really tough day one day. Had checked somebody and it just was a bad contact, very stressful. And this job is not devoid of any other job. It has its stressful days, and it has its days that you think you're not sure why you're doing this. And I'd pulled up on a riverbank, which was kind of a scenic place that I kind of like to go, and was just there contemplating, why am I out? Why am I doing this? Trying to calm myself, I guess, from the stress. And I look out my door and I see a rabbit run across. It wasn't no big deal, it's just a rabbit, right? Well, I seen another rabbit run across too. And these rabbits, as I start watching them, they're playing. Well, one rabbit runs in front of the other rabbit and he hides behind a log, and the other rabbit comes along in a minute and he finds that rabbit. And as soon as he finds it, both rabbits jump up in the air. And I think, well, that's kind of funny, that's kind of cool. Well, then I watch the rabbit go do it again, and the rabbit finds him, and again they jump up in the air, they're celebrating. I watched these rabbits do this 5 or 6 times till they work plumb out of sight. It was obviously a game the rabbits were playing. I would call it hide and seek or tag, that we watch us as kids, or we watch our kids play all the time. And I was watching wildlife play something like that, and it was just a calming experience to me. It was just a fun moment to see wildlife out interacting. If I hadn't been doing my job and doing the things that I do, or even had that stressful day, it's something that I would have never witnessed.
Well, we hope today's stories remind you that Oklahoma is a perfect place to explore. So no matter how you choose to enjoy our state's incredible natural world, remember, your adventure starts with Outdoor Oklahoma. You're not going to want me to do the math on that, are you?
You can if you want.
Outdoor Oklahoma is produced by the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation and is proud to serve and be funded entirely by sportsmen and women and outdoor enthusiasts who love and appreciate all things wild in the great state of Oklahoma.
So what do you guys have there?
It's just a turkey call.
Just a turkey call. That's pretty special.
That has his name and stuff engraved on it.
That is beautiful. Thank you very much.
Did you guys make that?
Yes.
Do you know how to use it?
Yeah.
Let me see how to use it.
Oh, maybe so, yeah.
It's hard to do it because I don't really have...
From outside in. Outside in.
Give this one to Marshall. Let's Darren help us.
That is awesome.
Give Marshall his.
Oh man!
Thank you, sir.
Very
It
much.
made you want to.
Wow.
You're welcome, Marshall.
Well, mine needs chalk.
When did you guys make these?
Yesterday.
Wow.
It's way more talent than I've got.
Very much.
Thank you all.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That is great.
Thanks, guys.